Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Balton, and this is a segment about the Arctic Ocean. I have been working on the Arctic, and particularly Arctic Ocean issues, for some 20 years. And today, the problems of the geopolitics of the Arctic are maybe worse than I've ever seen them. But the challenges confronting the Arctic Ocean have not gone away, and I do believe that people of goodwill can still find a way forward. And we have such people on the panel today, and also many of you in the audience, and we will hear from them. I'd like to begin by offering the floor to Ambassador Peter Thomson, the UN Secretary General Special Envoy for Oceans, to give us some opening remarks. Peter, please.
Thank you very much, David, and good afternoon, everybody. Great pleasure to be back in Iceland. What a great country this is. What a great city Reykjavik is. So I've heard so much about the Arctic Circle over the years, and I'm really glad that I finally made it. So all courtesies observed. I know there's a lot of very important people in the room, and I guess I should explain why I'm invited here by President Grimson. I'm the UN Secretary General Special Envoy for the Ocean, as most of you know, and in that role, my basic remit is to support SDG 14, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal for the ocean, to conserve and sustainably use the ocean's resources. And as part of that remit, I've been responsible for overseeing the UN Ocean Conference system, which from the outset has been in existence to support the SDG 14 implementation effort. And some of you may have been present at what turned out to be the greatest global ocean meeting probably ever held, which was held in Nice in France, co-hosted by France and Costa Rica. And no doubt Ambassador Poivre D'Arvor will be expanding on that this afternoon. He was the prime organizer of that. Anybody in the audience who was there will have witnessed the incredible power that emanated from that conference in favor of ocean action. And as the Ocean Envoy, I've learned that our links to the ocean are more complex than most of us will ever really fully comprehend. And that's why on a daily basis I've been motivated to repeat the words, no healthy planet without a healthy ocean. Of course, the codicil to that mantra is that the ocean's health is currently measurably in decline. So the mantra is highly relevant when we get up here to the Arctic, and particularly to the central Arctic Ocean, that body of water, size of the Mediterranean, which lies between all the EEZs of the Arctic states. It's a truly unique place. It's the quietest ocean on the planet, yet it's teeming with life. It's deep seas and continental crusts and ridges, and the seamounts of the ocean. They support the growth of plankton and ice algae and fish and seabirds and marine mammals, many of which are not found anywhere else on the planet. So the Central Arctic Ocean and its connection to the Arctic coastal seas found in the EEZs of those surrounding states have sustained Arctic indigenous groups of people for millennia. And I've been privileged yesterday and today to listen to leaders of the Arctic indigenous peoples talking about how their ancestors lived in harmony with these ecosystems for thousands of years. This was a moving experience for me, because those of us who are ruled by our responsibilities under the principle of intergenerational justice see that the continuity of family and of environmental integrity and of enduring culture as our greatest worth. It's thus really shocking just to think that succeeding generations may not know many of the wonders of that inheritance. It's now well understood the Arctic is warming 4 times faster than other parts of the planet. Summer sea ice is melting at an accelerating rate, and refreezing is taking place later each year, and sea ice thickness is being diminished. The warming has set off a cascade of changes and stresses for ocean life in the Arctic, including crashes in fish, mammal, and seabird populations in some areas, as well as migration of new species into the Arctic, both in the air and the sea. As the existing fabric of life in the Arctic frays and the resilience and adaptability of Arctic people is being tested so sorely, we have little understanding of how the ecosystem will restructure in an increasingly warm and ice-diminished sea. But the criticality of these changes isn't just felt in the Arctic region. For almost all of human history, the sea ice of the Arctic has acted as a crucial component of the planet's cooling system and has been an essential driver of global ocean currents. Changes to the Arctic cryosphere are also having increasingly clear negative effects on regions thousands of miles south, contributing to rainfall changes and flooding and extreme heat and the stalling of the jet stream. But the changing climate isn't the only threat that we're facing. As Arctic sea ice diminishes, there's growing interest in accessing the Central Arctic Ocean for new industries, including deep-sea mining and transpolar shipping. Let us be honest with ourselves. There is much we do not know about how these industries could impact this ocean. Deep-sea bed mining will bring pollution and disturbance impacts not only in the seafloor, but in the water column. And how this pollution would interact with sea ice is entirely unknown. Industrial shipping could greatly increase pollution and noise and spill risks in a region so remote that search and rescue and emergency response capabilities are extremely limited. Without a new agreement to control these risks, I'm genuinely concerned that the activities of a single country or company could cause irreparable harm to the region before governance is in place to prevent it. Therefore, a multilateral effort is needed to ensure new activities do not start without adequate research and an appropriate governance structure. The responsible course for us all is a precautionary pause on any new economic activities and an inclusive dialogue on the Central Arctic Ocean's future. To achieve that, we'll need to see decisive steps. First up, the advancement of the precautionary pause on new industrial activities in the Central Arctic Ocean will have to meaningfully incorporate Arctic indigenous people into discussions and decisions. Secondly, it will have to promote and provide the means for scientific research. Next up, representatives of civil society and indigenous communities and scientific bodies, along with national and subnational governments, need to get organized in an advocacy movement that creates the necessary momentum. That momentum needs then to be channeled through the relevant avenues of multilateralism, including the Arctic Council. If you look at relevant multilateral challenges, you see there are many. And I give as an example the preparatory process for the UN Decade of Ocean Sciences conference in April 2027 in Rio. For the UN Decade's dialogue is, of course, solidly grounded in science that incorporates indigenous and local knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, reaching the milestone of BB&J's entry, the High Seas Treaty, of its entry into force this year has been a massive achievement. It will be tremendously important for securing the protection of the world's high seas and hopefully in due course the Arctic Ocean. But in the meantime, more precipitate action is required in order to reach the precautionary pause required now for the Central Arctic Ocean. Of course, the good news is that we have an excellent precedent to work from in the shape of the Central Arctic Ocean Fisheries Agreement. So I say again that building on that precedent and considering the unique qualities of the Central Arctic Ocean, the responsible course is for the Arctic and near-Arctic states to begin discussions on an agreement for a precautionary pause on new economic activities in the Central Arctic Ocean. To arrive at that precautionary pause agreement, I urge all parties, including, of course, the region's indigenous peoples, to work together, gathering knowledge and collaborating on scientific research and championing the precautionary pause proposal. So that when we do, and if we do, that we will be doing the right thing for people and planet. Having witnessed you all achieve this before on the fisheries agreement, I'm very confident that you can do it again. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. With us on stage as well, our ambassador, sorry, from my left, Olivier Poivre D'Arvor. He is the special envoy of the French President Macron for oceans and poles. Dr. Mary Takoko, she is the chief executive officer of the Pacific Whale Fund from New Zealand. And Louie Porta, who's the director of the Arctic Ocean Initiative, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation in the United States. Ambassador, I'd like to start with you. You were one of the chief organizers, the chief organizer of the recent UN Ocean Conference in Nice. What lessons can you draw from the attention that the global oceans are receiving, including through conferences like that are applicable here in the Arctic region?
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. And Nice was an incredible success. And I should pay tribute to Peter Thomson and all the 64 head of states of government who were here in Nice for 5 days working with us. That was probably a very unique occasion to raise the political awareness on the ocean issues. There are plenty of outcomes, but the most important one, which concerns all of you and which is for our planet a great victory, is the ratification of the BBBNG Treaty, Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction. That means since we get in New York at the last General Assembly in New York a few days ago, the 675 ratifications, so 15 more than we need. It was 60. So we are sure that this treaty will enter in force in January. So,
that's right.
And the good news is that it concerns half of the surface of the globe, of the planet. That's not nothing. That's a huge achievement. It was not a surprise for us because we have been working on that for years, and not so many years, due to Renali, which I think is here, a Singapore diplomat. In 2023, we got the treaty, but we have to sign it and then to ratify it. And this, for that, was absolutely a big success. That's the good news. That's the good news for all of you, and just the occasion for me to remind our friend from Iceland that they have to ratify. It's never too late. It could be a good Christmas gift for all of us. It took 20 years. It took 12 years, to ratify the UNCLOS treaty from 82 to 94. My main concern here in Reykjavik is about the Central Arctic Ocean. It's related also to the high seas. We need, after the Fisheries Treaty, which is an important one, we need a new agreement. And this agreement you are working on, I know, Louis, recognizes the importance of this Central Arctic Ocean for Arctic peoples and its global climate service. It's also supporting a moratorium on new industries like deep sea mining. Deep sea mining is a crime. It's a crime, absolutely, because we don't know what is in the deep sea. And also a moratorium on transport shipping. There is bad news. I'm sorry about that. Just it's breaking news. And it tells a lot about this complex multilateralism we are facing now. There is only one country which voted against the political declaration of the UNOC. It's not Afghanistan, it's not Iran, it's US. And if the plastic treaty in Geneva was a failure in August, it's because some countries, Saudi Arabia and US, work a lot to make it a failure. And the bad news is that just 5 minutes ago in London, we have just know that the wonderful agreement on the decarbonation of the maritime transport, zero neutral carbon in 2050 was this agreement, which was really due to the activism and the bad activism of the US, has been postponed for 1 year. And US, Saudi Arabia, and all these things, they are not ocean leaders. They don't deserve to be the first EEZ. Because when you have such a domain, you know, when you are responsible for such a domain of biodiversity, of wonderful things, you can't do that. Plastic and decarbonation of the maritime transport. So sorry, there are some ocean leaders, and Iceland is definitely one, and a lot of our Arctic countries are part of that. But those countries, I give the name very clearly, are not at all.
Okay, thank
That's
you
clear.
for that. I'm sorry for the bad news. Mr. Porta, you are spearheading a long-term effort by the Moore Foundation to strengthen conservation efforts in the Arctic Ocean. Can you give us a sense of how such efforts are making progress in light of the challenging geopolitics we face?
Sure. Nice to see everybody, and thank you for having me. I mean, before answering that question, I would say the Moore Foundation is making a historic investment into the well-being of the polar region, nearly $300 million over the next 10 years. And so premised on that is a hope that the cooperation and the spirit of Arctic exceptionalism can hold and be redefined to meet the moment that we're in today. It has held in the past in different moments of geopolitical tensions, and I believe it can hold again. But further to that, why the Arctic? Why did the Moore Foundation prioritize the Arctic? For all of you, it might be very obvious. You're Arctic people, you're Arctic experts, and that's your passion. But foundations can pick things from all around the world. And so I'd offer a few points that give me the long-term hope that we'll be able to bring together the right values and outcomes that we need to realize. First, the region is changing fast, perhaps faster than any place on the planet. And it needs help, but it needs the right kind of help. Help that recognizes that first and foremost, the Arctic is not an edge of some frontier. It's a well-lived homeland since time immemorial for nearly 5,000 people who today still call the Arctic home. It has a unique history of indigenous rights and treaties and identities that really are what give the kind of initiatives that we're talking about the chance to be different. And what Ambassador Thomson was saying, I resonate with, because what are we really talking about? We're talking about when we find parts of the ocean that we have not yet exploited. We generally exploit until we have a problem, and then we study why, and then we figure out what to do and manage what's left. And so the initiative, which is premised on the values of sustainability and the premise and the values of indigenous rights and livelihoods, seeks to reverse that paradigm, to first understand, then manage, and then figure out what to do and why, so that we can elevate this region, one of the last in the planet, I might add, that does not have to suffer through the boom-bust dynamics, and we can imagine 100 years of prosperity so that in the future, the stage can still be filled with people working to achieve a great future for it. And then lastly, in the part that I resonated with the most is it's the spirit of hope, because hope is not a naive position that you take because you believe in all the good things. It's a position of great courage. And so when confronted with the challenges of our time, that hopefulness is what will drive the initiative. It's what's driving our grant making. It's what's driving our partnerships. And it's what's driving the solutions we hope to achieve.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes? Dr. Takoko, you have been a leader in seeking stronger ocean conservation efforts in another part of the world, in the South Pacific. Can you offer us here some lessons you've learned from your work that might also be applied or adapted for use in this part of the world?
Kia ora. He taura e tariki ngā mana, ngā waka, ngā reo, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Greetings from my people, the Ngāti Pro Nation, situated on the east coast of New Zealand. It's wonderful to be here after a 2-year absence, where I came with others to talk about the importance of ocean conservation from our indigenous worldview, our Pacific worldview. We are people of the moana. We say, ko te moana, ko te moana ko au. I am the ocean is me. For us, the ocean isn't just a resource to be exploited. She is our ancestor, and that is the worldview that guides our work at the Pacific Whale Fund and the Moana Nui Sanctuary Trust. There are 3 key areas and lessons I believe that the Pacific can bring here in the Arctic. The first is the exceptional work we've done to achieve 30 by 30 goals, which is to ensure we have vast marine protected areas. I stood on stage here and said that we had a goal to protect 2 million square kilometres of our ocean. Well, actually, we've increased that goal to 12.5 million square kilometres of ocean. And actually, this year, just at our UN Oceans Conference, we heard the announcement from Melanesian countries that they will be looking to protect 6 million square kilometres. We also heard from Tahiti, who are looking to add another 4 million square kilometres to that target. And then, of course, we have the Cook Islands, who already protect 1.9 million square kilometres. So what that tells us is that the Pacific is really leading the way around ocean health, and we are trying to create resilient strategies which are indigenous-led, which is super important, noting that we have the highest amount of indigenous populations in our region per capita. And so you're seeing all of these beautiful values around ocean protection coming to the fore. The second area that we've had exceptional success in is the area of the rights of nature. We are the first peoples in the world to call for the legal personhood of our whales. Why the whales? Because the whales are the bioengineers of our oceans. They also sequester huge amounts of carbon. And traditionally, before industrial whaling, which saw almost 2 million whales taken from the southern oceans, the Pacific Ocean was actually the world's largest carbon sink, and actually is today, but it's operating at a very small percentage of its total capability, which is why our plan, which is something we've been working on for the last 5 years, is focused on whale-centric ocean regeneration. We believe that we can bring back the health of our oceans in 1 generation. And why is that important? Well, as we know, the climate to ocean nexus is not only just a scientific truth. We see it happening here in the Arctic. We see it happening with the inundation of our small atoll countries in the Pacific. But it also really leads to this idea that it's a lived reality. It's so important going to the future that we start to get serious about this shared destiny that we have confronting our oceans in the Arctic. As your ice sheets are melting, all of those waters are landing where? In the Pacific. Because at the end of the day, there's no such thing as 7 seas. There is 1 ocean, and we share that ocean. So in the Pacific, we now talk about climate trauma, the very real scenario that we may go to sleep at night, and while we do so, especially when those king tides hit, our homes might actually be washed away when we wake up. This is a very real phenomenon. So I am here really to share this message, which we shared 2 years ago. At that time, I couldn't even walk through the front door of the UN and look at the amazing company that I'm in now. And on that note, I want to share what that original message was to Peter Thomson. We want to call on the UN to support the whale, or the tohora, our ancestor, as the official ambassador of the oceans, and furthermore for the United Nations to, with us, lead a global campaign to confer legal personhood on the whale as one of the best strategies that we can put in place, not only to recover 1 million whales across the planet, but also in the process, the health of our oceans and the health of our communities, whose culture is inextricably linked to the tōhara. Nō reira, tēnā koutou and tēnā koe.
Wrong again. The whale in the room.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Should bring one more for Paul Watson.
Yes.
See here? Oh.
Ambassador Thomson, in your opening remarks, if I heard you correctly, you were calling for work to begin toward a new agreement, an agreement that would call for a kind of a precautionary approach to new industrial or commercial activities for the Central Arctic Ocean. If I understood you correctly, your vision included lots of different types of players to be participating in this, a kind of coalition of the willing, or if you could just say a little bit more about the types of groups you could see supporting such an effort.
Well, I mentioned the precedents of the Central Arctic Ocean Fisheries Agreement. If you have a look at that, it is a treaty with which is deposited in Canada and is signed by the states of Arctic and near Arctic countries. So I think at the end of the day, this is a state responsibility, and I've obviously been doing a bit of lobbying with some of the states represented here at the Arctic Circle. And it is for them really to champion this conversation. This is a fire starter, right? And if we can get, I would say, 3 champion states to get the conversation going through the Arctic Council working groups and so on, and through all the other multilateral meetings that we go to. I mean, I'm sure many of you will be at the UN Environmental Assembly down in Nairobi in December. Multilateral processes, there are many where this could be socialized until eventually you get enough momentum that there's a treaty agreed to. I mentioned the states, but I think states are driven by responsible groups within their boundaries. And I mentioned in my speech the indigenous groups. If you think of the Inuit Council and so on, that they should be the ones probably who are motivating the states into action and saying, we want to have this conversation, we want to be at the table when the conversation is taking place as we lead towards a decision. We're not asking for, the design of something which has never been there before. As I say, there is that precedent, but also it's just basically the responsible thing for us to do, to blunder in without knowing the science and talking to the communities of the region would be irresponsible behavior.
Thank you very much. Ambassador D'Arvor, you, I think, rightly called out the problems that the current U.S. administration is having with respect to advancing issues related to the oceans, including the Arctic. But surely there's yet another problem child, that is Russia, the largest nation in the Arctic. Currently, cooperation with Russia in most forms has drawn, if not to a close, at least to a pause. What's your vision moving forward? Is there a way to rebuild bridges with Russia, perhaps after things in Ukraine change? What do you see there as possible?
It's a pity for science not to be, for the scientists not to be able to work with Russian scientists on Arctic issues. But since the war, Russia has decided to make in Ukraine. It's not possible for those reasons, you understand. But it's a pity for the science itself, because we have been working for years and years with them, especially the French one, in either in Arctic or in Antarctica as well.
Yes.
We have been working a lot in Antarctica, in Vostok Station, and it's due to this cooperation between France and Russia that the climate change effect was discovered with the ice sheet. So, because the climatic change exists for those who have adopted on that. That's the first thing. Russia is not an easy partner. Forget about the war, but the position of Russia in CAMLA, which is in Antarctica, the organism about the biodiversity, we have tried to propose two new MPAs in Antarctica for years and years, and due to the position of Russia and China, it's always, and then probably US will join the club. So it's a difficult partner, but such a wonderful country for science. So,
yeah. For the record, it was the United States and New Zealand that co-led the effort to create the Ross Sea Marine Protected Area, the largest in the world, off of Antarctica. Mr. Porta, we've talked a little bit about the coming into force of the High Seas Treaty, the BB&J Agreement. I'm wondering if you see that as having applicability in the Arctic as a tool, or at least as a spur to action on conservation matters in the Central Arctic Ocean.
Yeah, sure. So, it's an incredible thing, the ratification of the High Seas Treaty. Prior to that, we had no legal mechanism to protect half the world. So it's hard to imagine a healthy world without a mechanism such as that. It's also true that it, in the short term, seems to create global tailwinds for high seas protection. But it will take many years to be able to stand up MPA-specific mechanism within that treaty. And so in the short term, I think it does create momentum to accelerate places that need that attention, but will be realized through sector-based reforms rolled up and recognized into a treaty agreement. And so it certainly is a broadly enabling framework, and because it doesn't require the completion of the mechanism to achieve its outcome, the Central Arctic Ocean should be an area that gains increased focus as a place that can be protected now and recognized later by the High Seas Treaty. And to put that into context, and why that matters additionally, is that for all of human history, this area has been covered by ice. And that ice prevented the industrial pressures that have taken place in many of our world's oceans from taking root there. Alongside the stewardship of indigenous people who protected those areas, we're now seeing the ice go. So we do have an urgent need to accelerate action in this space so that we take the place of that ice and secure a healthy future for the high seas.
Thank you. Dr. Takoko, final question for you, and then I want to ask the audience if they have any questions. You've spoken very eloquently about the role of indigenous peoples and indigenous knowledge in your part of the world as helping to drive forward ocean conservation efforts. Well, in the Arctic, this is another place where indigenous peoples and indigenous knowledge have been in the forefront of making advances. What connections do you see between the indigenous peoples in your part of the world and here? Are there synergies where we can learn from both groups of people as we consider next steps in the Arctic?
Great question, and the answer to that is absolutely yes. And I do want to recognise all the First Nations peoples who are here, from the Sami to the Inuit and our cousins in Alaska and Canada. I think what we're observing, especially in the conservation movement, is finally the recognition that the best investment we can make to be able to preserve the world's last remaining carbon biodiversity hotspots is to be encouraging and supporting Indigenous peoples to be able to continue their traditional lifeways. We have a focus on an investment strategy in conservation, which is moving away from the big NGOs to the Indigenous-led smaller groups and tribal nations, and wanting to invest directly into those groups. Why? Because while Indigenous peoples are only less than 5% of the world's population, we govern or we manage 30% of all terrestrial resources, and the same, not resources, but locations, and that same figure can be applied to our oceans. So around the world, there really are 32 key biomes. We have high concentrations of Indigenous communities next to nature. We need to bolster our efforts in preserving those places because actually, in the name of climate action, some of our indigenous communities are being moved off their land to enable really bad developments, like bad carbon developments, for instance. What this means is Indigenous decision makers need to be at the table and driving these initiatives and putting in safeguards to ensure that our communities are protected. I believe that partnerships between the Arctic and Pacific nations make sense. You know, we have traditional knowledge systems that have only been starting to come to the fore in the conservation movement recently. But you look alone at our celestial knowledge, where we as Polynesians actually can draw a lot of information about what's going to be happening across our climatic cycles over the next year. Those are the kinds of information which are also shared by those who live on the ice. We follow the same star paths. Our ancestors have a lot of shared information. Imagine if we work more in sharing that information to create truly authentic Indigenous climate strategies. I believe this would be something that would benefit all of our nations represented in this room today. Kia ora.
Thank you very much. We have less than 3 minutes left, perhaps time for one quick question and one quick answer. I see a hand there, sir. Please let us know who you are and please keep your question brief.
Simon Holmström from CSAT at Risk. We're an ocean NGO, umbrella NGO for European NGOs. I thank you so much for calling out industries are very extractive and very risky, deep sea mining. Now, it's not only a risk in the Central Arctic Ocean, it's already a risk in the Arctic. So my question is, as Norway now is planning a new government program, what is your message to them?
Does anybody want to take a stab at that?
For Norway, I just joined the coalition for precautionary pause or moratorium of deep sea mining. So we are already 39 countries, so we will be very happy to host Norway.
So the Norwegian government, as I understand it, has for the time being put on pause a proposal to begin mining, not in the area beyond national jurisdiction, but on the Norwegian continental shelf. We will see how things go, but my sense is that the politics of this in Norway have gotten rather more complicated, and elsewhere around the world we hear greater and greater calls for a pause on deep seabed mining everywhere. We will see how that plays out. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we don't have time for more. Thank you very much for your attention to this, and please join me in thanking our panelists for their excellent presentations.